6 a.m. to 10 a.m. We broadcast on Spice FM 94.4 in Nairobi, Mombasa it's 87.9, in Kisumu 102.5, 96.0 in Nakuru, Eldoret is 96.7, Nyeri 90.9, 97.7 in Malindi. We are live on KTN Home for 2 hours between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. and we are live throughout the 4 hours on Spice FM KE, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and our website www.spicefm.co.ke. As we begin the hour, we always do this. City Muga. What is today's proverb?
Don't stand in a place of danger expecting miracles.
Don't stand in a place of danger.
You know, this space word
Expecting
has
miracles.
existed for the longest time, but it's woven its way into modern language where everything, like we're now in a talk show space.
Yeah.
Okay, we're having
In a
a discussion
happy space.
about a political space. No, place, not space.
No.
Okay. Don't stand in a dangerous place expecting miracles. We're having a BBI conversation this morning. Shortly, we'll be speaking with Uasin Gishu woman representative Gladys boss Shollei, who has her own views on the BBI amendment. So initially, there was what that she had actually even recorded a video and released a video talking about what she has seen in the BBI report and the initial draft amendment bill. And now, what has been published as a draft amendment bill, she has a version 2 of the same review of the same. But let's look at the comments of what people are saying on social media based from the conversation we had with Boniface Mwangi and Charity Say.
Okay, so quite a lot this morning. Simon Gondo says BBI is a piece of paper. In healthcare, it has no health service commission. Total waste of our resources. It's a must fail, according to Blessington. And Abu Jamal Dennis says Charity and Boniface did not give their views before the BBI committee, but are opposing the views of those who assumably did. This is the definition of a selfish country. Okay, so BBI is nonsense. I tend to agree with Boniface, according to Julia. Uhuru seems to be driven by something that's bigger than himself, the need for survival after the fact. Mike says, the Linda Katiba movement should concentrate and encourage the implementation of the Constitution 2010 by ensuring all the transition clauses are mapped out. Those that are meant to be passed by Parliament, all the subsequent legislation that is meant to be in place is flagged out. And finally, let us look at all the institutions that need to be put in place to ensure that they are in place and look at their structures and how they are functioning. Victor says, quite informative, but I'm just wondering, is there anything meaningful that can be said other than power belongs to the people? Sammy Brown says, I'm tuned in. BBI is for us Wananchi. Then why don't they give us time for even 2 years to heal from corona so that we can have enough time to go through it and understand it? According to Johanna, the signature collection of BBI has no yes and no options. I signed for no in Murang'a County. So the question, is it a conspiracy to hoodwink Kenyans that they are voting for no, but actual facts we're signing for a yes? So many suggestions and thoughts coming in here. I can't support the BBI fraudulent scheme.
You're saying that the signature collection exercise has a yes and no?
No, it does not. The signature collection of BBI has a
no
no
and
and
a
yes
yes
option. Sorry, yes. I signed for no in Murang'a County. So the question, is it a conspiracy to hoodwink Kenyans that they are voting for no, but actual facts were signing for a yes referendum?
That would be interesting. It would be actually interesting to verify that particular issue. Why then would you be going to collect signatures?
It should be just a signature as opposed to a yes or no option.
If you're doing a signature, then you're already saying that it's yes for me. I want to append my signature to this so that we can go ahead and amend the constitution. Shouldn't be a yes or no at this particular point.
It shouldn't be.
Unless he got somebody hoodwinked him.
Don't I understand the process well? I thought there's a process and it begins with signature collection before it can move, before it moves on to the next phase where it goes to the county assemblies.
Yeah.
Then before it moves on to the, remember, you know, in this discussion, the thing I find interesting is we don't seem to discuss the county assemblies adequately, as though they are simply a rubber stamp that we need not worry about. We don't seem to discuss Parliament and their role. The focus seems to be the president and now his co-conspirator in this matter, the Honorable Raila Odinga. So, are we saying that all these processes are moribund? Are we saying that they are dead and buried and that they don't exist and they have no consequence? What are we saying exactly?
Well, you have a section of people who are saying just that. Listen to what Kennedy says. We are all activists in one way or another, however. I strongly believe, beyond doubting my shadows, that the BBI document may not be 100% pure to the dictates of our feelings and take, but it's a good thing to catapult us to another level.
So it's a movement, it's a step.
Yes.
Those are actually, even the time when we speak here to people and they call in and we ask them, would you vote, would you append your signature to this, would you vote yes to a constitutional amendment? The people who are saying yes are saying it on various grounds. Many are saying yes because I want peace. Yes, because I completely support the idea of a handshake. I completely support the idea of peace and bringing the two leaders together and bringing the two sides together. And for that reason, whatever it contains, I'm going to vote yes. I'm voting yes for peace. Now, there are those who are voting yes for peace, and then do they really completely understand that whatever is contained in the Constitution may not necessarily be the one that brings the peace to them?
No.
Or is it the fact that, okay, because of what I have seen, I trust the process, because of what I have seen, because I've seen the two gentlemen sitting together and agreeing to shake hands, because I've seen the last 2 years of the two gentlemen working together, the two main political parties in the country working together, because of the progress that we've seen as a country. Because of that, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying, yes, whatever is contained, whatever good is contained in this document, I want to say yes to it. It's a step, however minimal a step it's going to be. It's a step. It's moving us forward.
Yeah, but then I hear you saying then, by virtue of that people are saying yes or no to so many different things. There is no clear-cut, demarcation as per what you're saying yes to. You're saying yes to peace? Are you saying yes to shared government? Are you saying in its entirety, you're saying yes?
Are you saying yes to the constitutional amendment?
So there are so many thoughts that people have and the reasons as to why they're saying yes or no. It's not just one thing that's set or cast in stone. And I think now, unfortunately, it's a bit of a dangerous place to be in, because then the results of such that you have people then who would be disenfranchised because they say, actually, this is what we are getting. This is not actually what I agreed to, or this is actually not what I said no to. And does it then come from an understanding of what this process is actually meant to fulfill? And I think there we also deal with a problem, because from the very beginning, when people were being engaged, when Kenyans are being engaged, do they actually realize this is what it's for? This is what it means. When you say yes, when you say no, this is essentially what you're inviting. And I think there is a problem, because a lot of people don't. Some people see their leader standing there and that's all they need. They will say yes.
Those that speak about the BBI right now, they're not talking about the contents. Huh? They're talking about it's reggae. We are
not
all
the
black.
contents.
It's reggae. I mean, it's about time. We need to change. We have listened to views, and views are contained here. So we are just going to vote and say yes to the views. We are saying yes to the BBI process. We are saying yes to the handshake. We are saying yes to all these things, but not really interrogating what exactly are these constitutional amendments. And I saw, for example, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba the other day was saying, I wish we'd actually break it down and go into article per article and say, this particular amendment, do I agree with it or do I not? Because then there may be some things that you could agree with in the Constitutional Amendment Bill, and there are other things that you may not agree with. So what is it that we're going to do? Is it looking at the baby and the bathwater and looking at the bathwater and seeing that there's a baby inside and let's not pour it, or just looking at everything and seeing it's all poisoned? Throw it down the river.
You would have to change the nature of a referendum if that were to happen. Because a referendum, as an erstwhile colleague put it, is a very blunt instrument. You're asking all these complicated things and you're asking someone to distill it to yes and no.
Yes or no.
See? Now, people like P.L.O. Lumumba are the individuals in this country who have the understanding of the law that the vast majority of us do not. Indeed, let them distill it. Let them break it down so that when there's an argument about it, it is at a forum and at a level that is easy to digest and say, okay, this is what this means, this is what it will imply now, tomorrow, the day after. But so long as it's this massive document and there's all the discussion we're hearing about it, believe me, a lot will be lost even in the discussion. But the fact that we're talking about it, in my mind, is a good thing. And if I look at what, again, I understand to have been the genesis of it, trying to find a practical way so that our political processes are not as contentious as they are. Not that they will never be contentious, they always will be contentious. But they are not as toxic as they actually are. That is their solution. Now, if someone thinks the solution is not adequate, better solution to the problems we have, what is it? The BBI, the two individuals have presented theirs. What alternatives are there? Because clearly, our elections have issues. And they have issues that could spill over into something we don't particularly want. Fine. The BBI has faults. My friend, it is crafted by human beings who have flaws. What do you expect? Now, having said that, which is a better one? Which is less in terms of flaws? Which one?
All right.
And what is it?
So how many people went to the BBI task force and said the solution to this problem is by expanding the number of seats at the national level? Then we can say that then, if you look at the views of the majority are what led us to have this proposal.
Making this.
The views of the minority also appear to be sending us to this particular direction. Maybe they were not using the same language as those who came in and they were elite and they were experts and they understand the issues of governance would be. But this is what the people said. That if we have everybody then feeling represented at the top, if we have the major political parties that participate in a national election feeling that they have a position, that they are represented at the top, we are not going to have an issue.
In the absence of something like that, then the assumption is that it was this particular group of people who crafted something around what the expectation at the people in the political class would want. Without the invitation or the contribution of the people. Because if they truly did go around the country and heard from the people that said, actually, you know what? In order to stem this problem that we've been seeing over time, the best thing is to have an inclusive government at the top. Have more people then who would share power. That's how we are seeing this problem that we have would be solved. In the absence of that, what you have is the assumption that it is a few people who made the decision. Unfortunately.
The people who support the person who then becomes the prime minister will still be feeling aggrieved. They'll be feeling, we were not participating in an election so that our person becomes a prime minister who can be fired by the president.
We wanted a president.
We were participating in this so that the person becomes the president. Why can this guy concede defeat instead of us conceding defeat so he becomes the prime minister, we become the president? Are we guaranteeing that we are not going to have that kind of conversation?
Nope.
Or that kind of tension?
Nope.
So what is this that we are seeking to solve with the BBI, and have we actually arrived at a solution? Now, and that could be an argument that we can have, going forth. But should we not have that discussion and saying, this is what the proposal is? Do we agree? Do we understand it? Can we, like you said, distill it? Can we break it down? Can we look at the pros and cons and then go to a referendum with full understanding that this is what it means? So when people say no, they're saying no after they have completely had time to interrogate and understand it. When people say yes, they have time to interrogate and understand it. Right now, as I see it, there are those who are saying yes. They're saying yes to the entire principle of a handshake. Those who are saying no to also, many of them are saying no to the entire principle of a handshake. They're saying no to the whole process. This whole thing was a charade. It was meant to hoodwink us. It was just meant to create positions at the top. And look what we have. We have 5 new positions at the top. Prime Minister, 2 deputies. We have MPs becoming ministers. We have 600 members of parliament. We have. And what is it that's coming to mind?
Eric,
as a person?
Can we go back to a basic question, all right? Let's start with the Constitution. Huh? Touted, one of the best on the planet, wonderful, excellent. Okay, good, wonderful. How has it helped? Why don't we look at why this constitution has not been implemented? And when we do, the BBI will spring up because some people figured, why it hasn't been implemented, so let's bring in BBI so that it can be implemented. And then we're being told, no, wait. These guys, that's not their intention. They actually want to change the constitution. And I'm thinking, right, politicians are at it yet again, okay? Right now, this isn't a Kenyan problem if you think of it. It's a human problem. The country on this planet that has been known to have the strongest of systems and traditions, that when it comes to an election people understand, has shown us that that is not always the case. You know why? Depends on the individual who's at the top. We have a situation in America where it is taking the Supreme Court of the various counties to tell them, sorry, you're not moving forward with this one. As far as we're concerned, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. Latest, Pennsylvania. Meaning, the argument that there was fraud, the courts are saying, no such thing. Due process was followed. But has it stopped the president from pushing his agenda? The answer is no. Politicians do that all the time. Now, do we have a situation in this country where our processes, we thought we had it in parliament and we're saying parliament captive. But then we have with the courts. Are the courts really captive? What is it then that we have to ask ourselves about us, that even with the safeguards that we have in place that are supposed to protect us against maybe a rogue government or a rogue president, that we don't even apply it? So if we can't apply it,
is it can't, CT? I'm going to stop you there, because it is it that it can't apply it, or just will not?
All evidence shows we can't. If you're not doing it, you can't. I mean, what other conclusion can you come to?
Can implies ability.
No, can't.
Right? Will is just that, your will. A choice to actually make this done.
Can't because I will not.
Can't. We
can't. You choose to. You choose not to.
Yes.
Not because you're unable to do it, or that you don't, or you have an inability to get it done.
You've heard my view on this one here. No. This one is
you're not physically or mentally disabled. You're not. You don't lack an ability to get it done.
Actually,
you just choose not to. Over and over again, you choose not to.
You don't have to have faulty faculties.
It's just an example. It's an example.
Yes.
But you're saying that there are things that have tied me, weighed me down.
Yes.
That's why I've not been able to get this done. But I don't think so.
Actually,
if you actually want it, looking at the people who have the responsibility of bringing the Constitution to life by the laws that we see legislated in the country, because that's what it does. It's the laws that bring the Constitution to life. The things that you then practice on a daily basis when you're sitting on the floor of the House of Parliament, the things that you should actually do. Are there things that you should actually get done in order to see this Constitution brought to life?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
Do you do them? No. Why?
Are there things that you could do but you cannot do because of the prevailing circumstances? Yes, as well.
No.
They could argue the same way. They could argue the same way and say, there are parts of this Constitution that we'd really like to implement, but then we are unable to implement because of one or two things.
So an initiative really that would be brought in, how is that going to change this then ability to get it done? What is it? Is it now going to change? Is a new initiative going to change your ability to get it done?
You have sharpened the pencils. Now it can.
Political perspectives are what the BBI is actually saying it hopes to change. Political perspectives. And the political perspectives should ease the tension, not eliminate.
So long as the perspective belongs to an individual, a human being, and a human being who then has the right to choice. So long as a perspective belongs to a human being, a document is not going to be able to change that, unfortunately.
Actually, it can. The document is necessary because you need a reference point.
Which we have said that they did not follow before with the old constitution.
Yes.
What's going to make the difference between that and this new one that was going to now force them to follow it?
It is a resounding yes, but okay, since we are muddying the waters, allow me to throw in some more mud and some more muddied waters. There is a surrendered delegation which a representative system like this one of ours offers. But this one of ours is gone beyond surrendering, because it appears that we've abrogated even our own positions as citizens who have a right to certain things, and not only surrendered, but we've ultimately surrendered it. Because when you say that you have people who are supposed to represent you and they don't represent you, and then you do nothing about it, then what are you saying?
But you don't do nothing about it, CT. You do something about it. You bring them back in the next term.
No,
you don't sit and do nothing. You even vote. You bring them back.
Actually, you're right.
You vote them out. You vote them out. You complain about them. You raise issues about them.
And then you vote them back in.
Let's bring in our guest for this hour, and this is the woman rep Gladys Shollei. Took to social media over the weekend and gave her views on now the BBI, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, as has been published now. Produced two videos. Initially had produced two videos where she was poking holes into what has been proposed for constitutional amendments. Now she's coming in and saying, all right, so we have some issues. BBI Amendment Part 1, the latest BBI Amendment Bill revealed that there have been substantial changes from the one that was launched at the Bomas of Kenya. A lot of proposals raised by the DP have been incorporated, and that's very welcome. She also goes ahead to say that the BBI proponents have accepted to bring back women to the National Assembly through nomination. With this in mind, let's assume 360 men are elected to the National Assembly. That will mean we'll have to nominate 180 women, bringing the total to 540 plus women. So women have come back to the National Assembly and all. But let's hear from the horse's mouth. And Gladys Shollei joins us this morning. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us in the Situation Room. Before we take a break, let's just take the first 2 minutes, first of all, to get your perspective now on this Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 as has been published. Are you for it? Are you against it?
I'm against it.
All right. So let's start.
Unless they make the changes that we are demanding.
Okay. So let's first of all talk about the changes that you're saying. There are some changes that you demanded that have been incorporated. What was the process of getting your changes incorporated in this, and who amended this?
One of the challenges we have is that we realize that despite the fact that they tried to say that the BBI process was a well thought out process, a process that was consultative and that the views of Kenyans were incorporated in a logical and organized manner, we now realize that they can undertake last-minute changes. Like as you said, the changes that were incorporated based on the issues that were raised by the Deputy President and government of Kenya, they've made last-minute changes. So it tells you it's a moving target. It's an ad hoc document that can be changed anytime, especially considering that they told us that the task force term had expired, they were funked as official, they had finished their work, and then suddenly amendments were made. Who made the amendments? On whose behest? Who approved the amendments? Did they go back to the Wananchi? But that tells me that and proves to us that they can continue making the amendments and building the consensus that we've been demanding.
So it's possible for a change to be made. It's possible to take in the views that have been coming up over the last, few weeks and days, and still even up till now. It's possible to take them in. So are you saying essentially that there then is a desire to shut out certain views and have this thing go on as it is?
Yes, I know that we had yesterday that Raila Odinga said that there's no more changes, the door is closed. But that is not his place to say. That is something that the citizens should say. But also, and that's why I said it's very bad when you start an illegal process in the first place. Because if you remember, the BBI process is a two-person initiative. It is not a people's initiative. It was based on a handshake by two persons who developed a 9-point agenda without consulting Kenyans. So it's actually not a popular initiative. It's a project of two persons who have now used government resources to hire consultants, set up task forces, steering committees, and technical experts, and then decided to develop a constitutional amendment. And what they have done is every time people have complained, they have made changes. That's why they had BBI 1, and then they realized there was an uproar from the public. They then went back and went to the BBI 2 process. And then when there was an uproar about certain issues, they then tried to correct it. So what they want is they're determined to ensure that this goes to a referendum and passes for them to achieve the executive seat that they want and the extra MPs that they want. But there is nothing there for the Wananchi whatsoever.
We have C.T. Muga, Nduoko, Eric Latif in the studio, and joining us on the line is Uasin Gishu MP Gladys Boss Shollei, talking about the BBI and the amendments that we've seen in now the bill that has been published, the constitutional amendment bill that has been published, which is different from what was presented at Bomas of Kenya, which is different from the idea that had been presented initially at Bomas of Kenya with the first BBI report.
The thing that I find particularly interesting with this entire discussion, this one I actually don't understand. I've heard that this entire process is illegal. Mheshimiwa, you are the person who has a legal background and understanding. Explain to me, a simple layman, the illegality of this process, please.
Article 3 of our Constitution states that every Kenyan has an obligation to respect, uphold, and protect this Constitution. It also goes on to say that any attempt to establish a government otherwise other than in compliance with this Constitution is unlawful. So, the manner in which these constitutional amendments were brought in were not in compliance with Article 3(2) of our Constitution. Because it didn't go directly to use either a popular initiative or a parliamentary initiative. What happened is, it started as a private initiative of two persons. A private initiative by two persons, whether it's the president or leader of opposition, is not a legitimate process envisaged in our Constitution. In fact, it amounts to subversion of our constitution, and in fact the critical pillars of our constitution. Remember that public participation is a critical pillar of our constitution that is provided in our laws, is provided in our constitution, and has been confirmed severally by our courts, and therefore is solidly part of our jurisprudence. Therefore, the development of the 9 points without it emanating from the public treason. So it started from the wrong footing, and we tried so hard to explain that no one listened. They then used government resources to sponsor and pay and push these personal initiatives.
Do you get the legal side now?
It was forced down our throats, and therefore it finally came to the stage where, as reasonable citizens, we say, okay, let's engage with it. And remember, until when it was launched a day or two before it was launched in Burma, none of us had seen the final copy. We used to be told, mostly by people from ODM and TLLK, that we are going to amend the constitution. We are going to have a referendum. And I said, you're going to have a referendum based on what? Can I see exactly which amendment, and are they those amendments that require a referendum?
So basically what she's saying is that the whole conversation about this was we were talking about a referendum even before we have seen the contents of this referendum, or these amendments that are being proposed in the referendum. You see, these are matters that had not gone through the whole process. True, but there's a question here, yes. and we're just sorting out the line with the MP, and then we have this conversation continue. Where she says that the 9-point agenda was developed by the president and his co-principal Raila, and not by the people themselves, did that block the people from participating or from adding 1 or 2 of those of the agenda? Did anybody feel that this is not part of the agenda we should be having? I mean, that's a question that you could ask.
Look, the example that I have of this is the Ekuru Court's deliberations and what he brought forth.
Yep.
Okay? And the process that they followed. That's my understanding of implementation of what the law is. But the reason why I raised the question is that my interaction with issues of the law has always been, there is more than one perspective on the same law. Same thing. You read it, it's written, and it seems to mean this.
The interpretation of it.
And you somebody else comes and uses the same
argument. And you'll find a vigorous discussion until you're left puzzling. Okay, so...
Like this particular one, let's actually flip this coin straight up at you, Mheshimiwa. So you're saying that this 9-point agenda was first initiated by the president and Raila Odinga. Let's look at Ekuru Court's Punguza Mizigo. Did it not start from the party? Did it not start from Ekuru Court's party coming to the people then and saying, we want to collect the signatures so that these are the things that we can discuss? It has to start from somebody initiating.
Usually, if it's the government, you can use a parliamentary initiative because you have the majority of members in parliament. It is not normal that a government uses a popular initiative and uses government resources to almost force the popular initiative by asking chiefs and county commissioners to be involved in collecting signatures.
Is it illegal?
When you say a popular initiative, it means it's driven by an ordinary Mwananchi. Ekuru Court collected 1 million signatures without using government resources, with just going on his own with Kenyans who are thought exactly like him. But I think that said and done, we have got to the point where they finally gave us, so it was predetermined that we were going to have a referendum. And I think what they were doing is they needed a referendum in order to sort of use it as a launching pad for Raila Odinga's 2022 bid. It was not necessarily about Wananchi. They also had a very narrow view of deciding that they are going to create certain positions. Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, several ministers, some MPs will become ministers, so that they can persuade certain political leadership to join them in the hope that they'll get the position of deputy prime minister. And if those persons were coming from large voting blocks, then they would have a standard chance of moving their people to vote in favor of the referendum. So the referendum that was being mooted was not about wananchi. It was about wanasiasa. It was about creating positions for certain people and using that to persuade the wananchi. And what they did is then put in some other goodies in the constitutional amendment so that wananchi can be persuaded that there's something good for them. And a good example that I will give you is a mixture of a schedule of additional constituencies to 28 out of 47 counties. So Kiambu gets 6, Makueni gets 1, Nairobi gets 12, Meru gets 2, Kisii gets 0, Tharaka-Nithi gets 0, Uasin Gishu gets 3. All that was to change our discussion because, you know, when will begin to say, oh, if we get more constituencies, we'll get more CDF. But that is not even true. First of all, the thing that must be said clearly to Kenyans is that there is no chance anywhere in our laws that a BBI task force or steering committee has the power of delimiting, reviewing, and naming new constituencies under our law. It is an illegality ab initio.
But I thought the BBI was a proposal, Mheshimiwa.
Sorry?
I thought the BBI was a proposal.
What do you mean BBI is a proposal?
I mean, it doesn't...
Is it possible for a constitution amendment to delimit the constituencies?
No. What they would do is they would then recommend that the Electoral Commission should undertake the review and naming of boundaries and constituencies as envisaged in Article 89.
Right.
Article 89 clearly says the mandate to review the names and boundaries of constituencies at intervals of between 8 and 12 years and not less than 12 months to the election is the preserve of the independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission.
All right. And
there
here,
is
what
no way
CT is
that
asking...
the task force can do it.
It's okay. What CT is asking, so if we went to a referendum and we voted yes to this amendment bill, which says let's increase our constituencies from 209 to the new number, there's a proposal on the side that will come and write and will be presented to the IEBC and says the new constituencies, this is the political agreement of where the new constituencies would come in. Now, create the boundaries for how those, for example, how shall you carve out the 17 constituencies in Nairobi to add an extra 12? That is a job the IEBC is going to do.
How does it work, Mheshimiwa?
No, the way it works, and I think you should read Article 89, because Article 89 states even the mathematical formula of how you arrive at 3 constituencies for Uasin Gishu, 12 for Nairobi. Because it says the boundaries shall take into account the number of inhabitants. They should be nearly as possible equal to the population quota, but the number of inhabitants of each constituency may be greater or lesser than the population quota in a manner specified in Clause 6. It goes on to say it takes into account geographical features, urban centers, cultural, economic, and historical ties. It talks about means of communication. It then talks on even that the IEBC, it even makes it very clear that the number of inhabitants of a constituency or ward may be greater or lesser than the population quota by a margin not more than 40% for cities and sparsely populated areas and 30% for other areas. It goes on to say that IEBC shall continue reviewing it until such time and consult interested parties and progressively work towards that ensuring that the inhabitants in each constituency and ward as nearly as possible equal to the population quota. It is so mathematical and very clear the way it is done, and there is much more that goes on to it. So, for people in a boardroom and people with no legal mandate at all, to sit and say 3 year, 4 year, 5 years.
Okay. I actually understand you, Mheshimiwa. There you've explained it to me now. If indeed it is an illegal process by just two individuals, let's say we took this thing to a court of law, what exactly would we charge them with?
No, the court will just throw it out. It will declare it an illegality.
Why then has this thing not been taken to court to be thrown as an illegality then?
You know, we did not see it until the constitutional amendment was gazetted. I started reading the amendment, and then suddenly I saw the schedule as I went on reading. Remember, the BBI report itself does not mention anything about boundaries.
Okay, so BBI itself,
and I have spoken to people
is not an illegality.
Sorry?
The argument here is that BBI is not an illegality. The formation of the task force, the formation of the steering committee, there has been no flouting of the law. The only area that you feel that the law has been flouted is with the amendment bill.
No, just remember what I said at the beginning of this conversation. I said it began as a private initiative, which was contrary to Article 3(2) of our Constitution. It is trying to establish a government or change the government in a manner other than in compliance with the Constitution.
So why wasn't that ever challenged in court?
Sure, because I mean,
2 years down the road,
it seems like a major thing now that we are looking at, because we are saying that essentially two individuals sat down and they decided that they wanted to change the operations of government, inherently so. And the only way you can do that is that if you can't have that as a private conversation between two people, essentially. And that seems like something major to me. If it's jumping out so clearly at people at this point, why is it not something that has been taken to the institution that can do something about it in the courts?
You see, in law, before you go to court, you have to have a cause of action. That means the wrong has to have matured. So like we said, at the beginning, we were told that BBI was just a document to discuss the 9 points and propose administrative and legislative changes. Just propose. Then it can go to the various, whether it's the parliament to make legislative change or encourage certain policy intervention. That is how they sent it to us. So at that time, even though you felt it was an illegality, because they were dangling the fact of a referendum at some point, we really couldn't, because they had not shown their hand that we are now going to a referendum. It is only now, after they have drafted the constitutional amendment, they have actually drafted the bills themselves. The bills haven't come out of parliament, as should be the case, or the proposals from ministries. It came from the task force. So this task force became the parliament, it became the public, and they decided the manner in which they can change the law and the Constitution. So it's only now that the cause of action has matured. Right. We now have a cause of action. They have shown us the boundaries, that they've actually ditched them, like they have the power to do so, which they don't. They have also drafted the constitutional amendments, which didn't even go to the public. For example, I don't think any Kenyan, anywhere where BBI went to, actually said that they want 640 plus members of parliament. I don't think anyone said that.
Yep.
And if you look at the BBI report, no one said that they wanted to have boundaries review done by BBI. And therefore, and you can see that, and in fact, the reason why they've been making changes last minute is to try and appease us. And I want to make this very clear. I have not endorsed the BBI process or their constitutional amendment at all. In fact, I saw last night that there was something by some media outfit that said Raila wins as Gladys Shollei endorses BBI. That tells you they are desperate. My views are clear. But because I'm also a law-abiding Kenyan, and also I don't want to always be negative, I recognize that they took into account the views of the deputy president that he raised at Bomas. Not all of them, some of them. And there's nothing wrong with me as a Kenyan saying, at least you're hearing our voices.
Can I ask you then, Mheshimiwa, so here you are saying that all of this is based on an illegality and it should actually be thrown out. There should not even be discussion on one side. On the other side now, you're saying that, all right, some of the views that the Deputy President presented at Bomas seem to have been taken in. Are you then saying that if today the Deputy President came out and said, all right, with what they've presented, it's not so bad, would you then accept this initiative, these proposals, this BBI?
I don't think, I think that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Remember, this is a political process. We also, it's not something that I make a decision myself. We will consult each other as like-minded Kenyans. We have been keen that even if one feels that there needs to be amendments to the Constitution, then it can't be forced down by a throat by a small section of Kenyans. It has to be something that Kenyans buy into. Constitution-making process is about consultation, building consensus, narrowing down what are the contentious issues and discussing it.
Mheshimiwa, you're a politician, and what you're saying in theory is really true. How often are the Mwananchi actually, how are they actually consulted? At independence, were we asked whether we wanted MPs or whether we wanted ministers? Even when we had the second revolution, when are the Mwananchi actually ever asked about these things? It is assumed that by electing leaders, the leaders will represent them. And how often do these leaders even go back to the electorate to ask them what they think about the decision making that they make in parliament?
Okay.
I am making the point that sometimes the voice of the people is used to further an argument that perhaps suits a certain perspective that one would have. Now, let me ask what I really want to ask you. If indeed, let's take for instance a hypothetical situation where the group you've been associated with, referred to as Tanga Tanga, were the ones who had proposed the BBI, would you oppose it as vigorously as you're opposing it? On a matter of principle, of course.
If the Tanga Tanga team, which I am a member of, had decided to propose this amendment, believe me, we would have done them in compliance with the Constitution. It would have gone to the Wananchi, it would have been foolproof, and it would have built a consensus. And this is possible because if you remember, the 2010 Constitution was the most consultative constitution process in the history of Kenya. That is in the Library of Congress.
Yep.
It's registered as that. If you go to the National Archives here in Kenya, and you go to the Library of Congress in the US, you will find the audio recording of the discussions by Wananchi in every location in Kenya. That's almost like half a ward as currently set out. And there was the representatives of women, men, youth, people with disabilities, etc. And they went to each of those places. Then after that, they built caucuses that then came to the Bomas of Kenya. And then what they did is they divided what they had as contentious issues, non-contentious issues. And what happened is, in fact, they reached a consensus on the non-contentious issues. And then, actually, what became the referendum campaign point was the contentious issue. So it took over 20 years to do that. So what I'd like you to do is actually go to the National Archives, get those recordings, and also look at the Committee of Experts report. So what the Committee of Experts were doing is looking at what was raised in every location in Kenya. Like the issue of dual citizenship. It was not contentious. Kenyans said that's not an issue. And so it was not a point that was going to be raised.
Yeah.
Then after that, we set up referendum committees to help in the campaign. And I do remember that I was in the Electoral Commission as head of electoral operations and voter registration during that time and voter education. Those were my 3 dockets. And I remember going to Uhuru Kenyatta when he was Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. And I remember telling him, because the government was supporting the Yes campaign, I told him that those people who are in charge of the referendum committees for the No campaign must be supported by government, because if government uses its resources and they are not able to mount a campaign for the other side of Kenyans, then they will not become legitimate. And I remember he told me, we're already spending too much money on the referendum. How can we spend more? I told him, you've already spent a lot of money. And if you don't add more money for the referendum committees, then what will happen? It will become an illegitimate referendum. So since you've already spent money, put in 10 more billion shillings, and that's what he did. And that's when referendum committees led by people like Martha Karua, Bishop Karaoke, and others, I can't remember, were actually funded to be able to also sell their no campaign.
As we come to the conclusion of this conversation, Mheshimiwa, I want to ask you, now, on the back of what you've just said, first of all, the BBI process and the entire attempt at amending the Constitution, you say this is an illegal process. And you say that because of that, you currently do not support this move to amend the Constitution. While at the same time, you've said that you and those like you in the Tanga movement are willing to listen and you'll have consultations. The leader of your movement, the Deputy President, has been using the word consensus for a long time now. Every time the Deputy President tweets about this matter, he puts the word consensus in capital letters. So if you got to a point where you felt that your views were accommodated, that your proposed amendments were then found, there's a way in which was a conversation around what you find to be contentious was accommodated, would you then support this illegitimate and illegal process?
You know, usually in everything you do in life, you've got to have a plan B. Because if you find that they're going to force it down our throats, then we've got to deal with it. At that time, we have to take action. They're also not going to sit back, because if one is determined to push through an illegal process, which has happened in Kenya before the 2010 constitution, that's what used to happen. But Kenyans went on fighting. When you remember, when we were fighting for a multi-party democracy, and sometimes you've got to say, this is the enemy that we are faced with. How are we going to deal with it so that we achieve what we want to achieve, and for the sake of the cause and those Kenyans that are behind us? So I won't answer your question by saying if they correct it or that. But allow me to say this. If you look at even the proposed amendments at the moment, I'll give you 3 or 2 examples. The amendments to 11A, where they say that the state shall promote sustainable agriculture, and then they decided to say sources of livelihood, including agriculture, pastoralism, and blue economy. When they made the new changes, they added those words, agriculture, pastoralism, and blue economy. What they were trying to do is try and accommodate what we said about the hustler. Every hustle matters. But it is not even genuine, because you don't need a constitutional amendment for Mama Mboga to matter, or for us to promote pastoralism. That is an issue that you can deal with by proper fiscal planning and taking into account every economic activity, no matter how small in Kenya. It is a matter that can be done by the National Treasury. You do not need to put it in the Constitution. After all, already 70% of Kenya are small-scale holder farmers. And yet that has been promoted throughout the years. It hasn't been because there's been a constitutional amendment. If you look at the part where they had put in an amendment, 18A, saying that every citizen has a responsibility to serve in the defense of the country, then I think they removed the word defense and said country, because people are wondering, are they making military service compulsory or what? I don't know. It was confusing. But even why put that? By virtue of paying taxes, I have a responsibility of serving in Kenya by paying my taxes. Once I pay my taxes, my country I'm serving my country, and my country should give me whatever services that I'm required to get. When you go to Article 82, so the first two I've told you shows that there is no need for a constitutional amendment to put this in place. Those are issues that already exist. At 82(1), where they are saying that Parliament shall enact legislation to sanction political parties that don't adhere to the 2/3 gender rule. That is very funny, because if Parliament is supposed to enact legislation to support the 2/3 gender rule, already there is a provision like that in the Constitution, which they have blatantly disobeyed. So you want to tell me that the President Uhuru Kenyatta, who has blatantly disregarded the constitution by not implementing the two-thirds gender rule, whether he's in cabinet, in not appointing the 41 judges.
With his brother, the deputy president.
Sorry?
With his brother, the deputy president is part of the presidency. I want to end this conversation here because we have to say goodbye to our audience on KTN Home, and then just give you an opportunity to conclude on this. I'm going to give you that 1 minute to conclude your point because you're making a very solid point. So you're saying that in this government which has flouted the implementation of the constitution, go ahead.
I hear the President Uhuru Kenyatta saying that he senses a constitutional moment. How do you sense a constitutional moment? He has no moral authority. The appointment of 41 judges, this is constitutional and it is obeyed. It is, the law says the president, the constitution says the president shall appoint the judges. It does not say the deputy president shall appoint. Then, if you look at the dissolution of parliament, the court ordered the dissolution of parliament. It also says the president shall dissolve parliament.
Yep.
The proclamation of dissolution is by the president and not by the deputy president. So, the president, even if he changes the constitution 100 times, is he telling us, I'm sensing a social moment, I need a new constitution, but somebody else, because my term is expiring, can implement because I have failed to implement. You cannot talk about, you must first be faithful to the constitution that exists, so that if you make any changes, we know you will follow that one. But he has failed to do that, and I don't think he should be telling us about following the constitution.
The constitution at all.
Or does he want or does he hope the future president will do it?
Probably so. Mheshimiwa, we want to thank you very much for joining us this morning. Asante sana. We want to have another conversation with you soon, and we'll invite you again.
Yeah, it's a really pity we didn't get to finish much of the things I wanted to say, but I hope I have an opportunity.
Yes, we will.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Asante sana.